Salvete, and welcome to Zombie Latin. Today we're going to be talking about what linking verbs are, what predicate nominatives are, and how to translate sentences using these two things. So the first question that you should write down in your notes is, what is a linking verb? And then we can put under that the definition that a linking verb is a verb which is followed by another word or phrase which renames or describes the subject. You'll probably need to pause the video here to make sure that you get this entire definition down in your notes. Make sure that the following examples also get written down in your notes when we look at them. So, our first example would be, Mr. Crone is a teacher. Notice how Mr. Crone and the teacher are the same person here. So since Mr. Crone and the teacher are the same person here, that makes is a linking verb. Teacher is renaming Mr. Crone. We could also use the example sentence, which you should write down in your notes. You are a student. In this sentence, you and student are the same person. Student is renaming you, so are is a linking verb. In a third example, which you should also take the time to write down, pausing if necessary, we could say, the house was red. In this sentence, the word red is not renaming the house, but it is describing the house. And so was is a linking verb again. I'm going to now give you pairs of sentences which you should write down in your notes, and you should try on your own to identify which sentence in the pair contains the linking verb. Write down the sentences in your notes. He will be a carpenter, and the man sailed the ship. Once you've written these down, pause and see if you can figure out which one of these two sentences has a linking verb in it. Hopefully, you said that the one with the linking verb is the sentence, he will be a carpenter, because in the first sentence, he and carpenter are the same thing, but in the second sentence, the man and the ship are not the same thing. Once again, take the time to write down these next two sentences and pause the video if you need to. We painted the walls. The islands were large. Once you've written these down, pause and see if you can figure out which one contains the linking verb. Hopefully you said that the sentence which contains the linking verb is, the islands were large. In the first sentence, we painted the walls. Walls and we are not the same thing, and walls also doesn't describe the word we. So painted is not a linking verb. On the other hand, in the second sentence, the islands were large. Large describes the islands, so were is a linking verb. Now I'm going to give you two sentences which will probably be more difficult. The two sentences which I'd like you to write down are, I tasted some candy, and the candy tasted sweet. Once you've written these down, pause for a moment and figure out which verb, the first tasted or the second tasted, is a linking verb. Hopefully, after pausing and guessing, you knew that the second verb tasted, as in the candy tasted sweet, was a linking verb. In the first sentence, tasted is not a linking verb because I and candy are not the same thing. In the second sentence, sweet describes the candy, and so in the second sentence, tasted is a linking verb. Now let's talk about predicate nominatives. And I want you to write the following down. A predicate nominative is a noun which is after a linking verb and which renames the subject. So if we go back to our first two sentences which we wrote down in our notes, Mr. Crone is a teacher and you are a student. In the first one, Mr. Crone is a teacher. The word teacher is our predicate nominative because it's a noun which is after a linking verb and which is renaming our subject. In the second example, and you should make sure that you have both of these examples written down, you are a student. Student is a predicate nominative because it is renaming you and is after that linking verb, are. And make sure you go back in your notes and write this down and label this. In our third example, the house was red. Red is not a predicate nominative because it is not a noun. A predicate nominative must be a noun. In this sentence, the house was red. Red is an adjective. Now let's take a look at how this is going to play out in our sentence translation. Make the header for your next section of notes translating sentences with linking verbs. We have two linking verbs in chapter 1, the verbs est and sunt. So est means is or there is, and sunt means are or there are. We'll talk about which one to use in a moment. Just notice that est then is going to be used with singular subjects, so the book is, and sunt will be used with plural subjects, so the books are. Make sure that you write all of these notes down on your paper before moving on to the next section. Now, remember how we had our chart from our previous notes of the endings of the first declension? I want you to rewrite this in your notes right now. So remember, it's nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative down the left side, singular and plural on the top. And remember that in our notes we had said that the first line, nominative line, would be used for subjects and predicate nominatives. Now since the only verbs that we know so far are est and sunt, which are linking verbs, then the only line which we're going to have to use from this chart right now is the nominative line. So for now, if we've got singular subjects and predicate nominatives, we'll use that singular a, and if we've got plural subjects and predicate nominatives, we'll use the plural ae. Let's take a look at how this will play out in an actual translation. Label the next section of your notes, Example Translations. So let's say we have the example sentence, the woman is a poet. The woman is singular, and so we look to our chart, and on the chart it says that a singular noun, if it is a subject or a predicate nominative, and those are the only things we're going to be dealing with this chapter, if a noun is singular, it is going to have the ending a. And so when we translate woman, it should say femina. Now since we've got the word is, we're going to use the word est to translate it. And finally, on the other side, the word poet is also singular, and so that will also end in an a and be poeta. Make sure that you write all of that example down in your notes. Now, as you look at this, you may be noticing something. Where did the words the and a go? And the answer is something that you're going to want to put in the margins of your notes. I want you to write down in the margins of your notes that Latin, as an entire language, had no words the, or un. These three words, collectively called articles, were almost completely absent from the Latin language. So when we translate from English into Latin, we can just ignore those words. Now for another example, let's try the plural of the previous sentence. The women are poets. Since the word women is plural, we're going to have to use the ending from the plural column, ae. And so we get the word feminae. Are is plural, and so we're going to use the word sunt to translate it. And the word poets is plural again, and so we're going to have ae as its ending, poetae. Notice how if we have a plural subject, we also have a plural predicate nominative. And if we have a singular subject, we have a singular predicate nominative. I want you to now try to translate the following two sentences in your notes on your own. I want you to write down and then take a moment to pause and translate on your own. The sentence is, the farmers are poets, and the sailor is a woman. Pause now and try to translate these on your own. If you translated them correctly, the first sentence should have been Agricolae sunt poetae, and the second sentence should have been Nauta est femina. The first sentence is plural, and so draws from the plural nominative spot in our chart. And the second one has singulars, and so draws from the singular a. Let's try the other way from Latin into English. Write down in your notes the sentences femina est agricola and poetae sunt nautae. Pause and take a second to translate these on your own. If you translated them correctly, you should have gotten the woman is a farmer and the poets are sailors. Notice how we had to supply the words the and where they made sense to us. There's no real rule about when to use them, when to not, but we can pretty much tell that the sentence woman is farmer sounds wrong to our English ears. And so we know that we're going to have to add the words the, or un wherever they're going to sound right in English. Now let's write down the last question of this lesson, which is, when do we use there is or there are as translations of est or sunt? The answer, which we'll write down below that, is that we're going to use there when est or sunt starts a sentence, rather than coming in the middle. Let's take a look at and write down a couple of examples in our notes. For an example sentence, let's look at est puella. In this sentence, since est starts the sentence, we are going to have to translate it as there is. Then, the word puella would simply be a girl. There is a girl. Notice we have to add a because otherwise there is girl doesn't really sound right. The plural example of this sentence would be sunt puellae. Once again, make sure that you write these sentences and their translations down in your notes. Since sunt starts the sentence, it would be there are as a translation, and the word puellae would simply be girls. Let's do two more sentences and see if you can translate them on your own. The first, which you'll write down in your notebook, will be a translation from Latin to English, and the second will be a challenge translation from English to Latin. The first sentence will be sunt insulae, and the second sentence, there is a memory. Take a moment to write these down, and then translate them. You'll need to pause to do this. If you translated the first sentence correctly, you should have gotten, there are islands. Sunt, you provide the there because it's starting the sentence. For the second sentence, you should have gotten, if you translated it correctly, est memoria. Notice how the there disappears into the est, which is just beginning the sentence and therefore means there is, and the disappears into the word memory because we don't have Latin words the, or un. If you have any questions about this, feel free to watch the video again and write down any questions you have in your notes, and then you can ask them of me in class. Well, later.